Hello and welcome to this video on how you can keep your bonsai tools in the best condition and reduce wear and tear. When buying bonsai tools, you can choose either carbon steel or stainless steel for the most part. The choice is based on personal preference, finances, availability and more. In general terms, the most common tool type will be carbon steel tools. These are nearly always cheaper, more widely available, and for the most part perform just as well as stainless steel tools, at least in the short term. The short term is key here. Beyond blades blunting quicker, carbon steel tools also have another problem. They generally come with a finish on their surface, generally speaking a blackened finish, and this will begin to wear off and begin to show rust much sooner. The issue is that the rust affects the aesthetics of the bonsai tool, but it can also affect the function. For example, the hinges can seize, the blades will also be less sharp, and handling can become unpleasant, particularly if it's not a finish that is incorporated into the actual metal. For example, if it's a painted finish or if it's some sort of lacquer. Fortunately, none of these things are too hard to fix. The means of fixing a tool is to reapply the surface finish in the case of this video, and specifically in this case, bluing the steel. Steel bluing is not a new thing. It's been used for a very long time to protect steel or iron products from rust and other forms of corrosion. For example, the fairy tales of the Black Knight and similar had a black armor from a very strong bluing finish. In fact, the same thing's been used for guns, even until the modern day, to protect barrels and parts of it from wear and tear. The reason it's used not just for these, but also for bonsai tools, is that for the most part it's relatively easy to apply as a finish and is reasonably hard wearing. To be clear, there are better wearing finishes, but they're more of a chore to apply in some ways. In fact, we would argue that the bluing finish is perhaps the simplest. Well, we say simple, but you will need a few tools. First, you will rather obviously need your bonsai tools to be all metal. That means that you should remove any wraps, plastic or other materials, because these will get damaged, if not destroyed, by the heating process that these tools will go through. You can put them back on afterwards, you just can't have them on while you're doing this. Next, you will need a blowtorch, either a basic propane torch or better yet a coffee can forge, but you can make things work any way you want to do this. You will need sandpaper, and you'll need something to hold your bonsai tools, for later on anyway. Finally, you will need a suitable solid container filled with oil. Now, we use an older ammunition box, but any solid container will work, but avoid material that can melt, as things will get hot. As for oil that will go in this, there are different schools of thought, but we favour oils such as vegetable oil. With everything ready and a willingness to do this, start by laying out your tools that will be worked on. It's generally easier to have them all ready to go at one time, and as you go through the steps, prepare one tool while the other goes through its step. After you have everything put to a side, select one tool and begin by sanding away the current finish. Make sure to remove all of the finish on the tool. Anything that is left behind will affect the bluing result that you get, and this is a problem, particularly if the current finish is not a bluing finish, as you'll not only get the contrast, but you'll get an inconsistent result. Sand it away with coarse paper to start with. This will allow you to remove all of the unwanted appearance. Once you manage to remove just about all of it, if not all of it, switch to a finer grit and repeat. You continue until you have a comfortably smooth finish. You do not need the end result to be perfectly polished, but comfortable. In fact, to a certain extent, if you're intending to, for all intents and purposes, not apply any other wraps or other work to this, having it slightly rough may be helpful, but you want it to be reasonably smooth just so you get a consistent bluing result. Now for the hard part. You need to hold the tools in something like a pair of wire pliers, or wrench, vice grip, or similar. Something where your hands are at least somewhat away from the part that will be heated later on. You want to hold the tool with this, particularly the part of the tool that won't be in the flame, and also a little bit further away if you can, remembering that the tool you're using to hold this will act as a sort of heat sink, as heat gradually works its way up the metal. You don't need to worry for the most part, but just be aware of it. With the tool secured in place, ignite your blowtorch and place the tool handles or parts you want to treat in the flame. Continue to heat this until it reaches an appropriate temperature, and this is an important caveat to this. We say appropriate as the temperature the steel reaches will dictate the final color of your bluing. For example, a temperature of around 200 degrees Celsius or 400 freedom units will produce a golden coloration once you finish this. Around 200 degrees Celsius or 540 freedom units will produce something closer to a purple-blue color. 840 degrees Celsius or 650 freedom units, a light blue color, and 890 degrees Celsius or 730 freedom units, if not higher, will be a dark blue to grey coloration. It's important to be aware of the fact that different heats will alter the final result. To know if you'll get a given color, you can either measure with a digital thermometer, or, if you're, let's say, willing, consult a steel heat color chart. Generally speaking, as you heat the carbon steel that makes the tool, it will reach a certain color, and that color should tell you roughly what temperature it's at. Understand, we say roughly as, well, rather obviously, the visual temperature in the human eye, it's not exactly a perfect indicator. Whichever way you wish to do it, once it's at the temperature you want, move on to the next step. Just be aware that before you do that, we do suggest a few things with regards to how you heat your tools. First of all, we suggest setting up a temporary forge, or at least something like this, with fire bricks or similar. The reason we suggest this is that it will allow you to do three things. The first is that you can heat multiple tools at the same time. This will let you save time and gas or fuel. The second is that it lets you get a more consistent result. The third and final is that, well, it's rather a bit more safe than trying to heat tools over an open flame. The other effect overall is make sure that when you are sanding your tools, you remove all rust on them before putting them in the flame. Any rust will prevent oxidation and therefore bluing. With that out of the way, now you have a suitably hot piece of tool steel. Hold it in your clamp or similar and move it to your oil. It's generally a good idea to raise the temperature of the oil slightly with a sacrificial piece of hot steel first. Understand, we're not talking about a huge increase, just enough that the oil's not cold. Now, you place your bonsai tool into the oil, and it should cool suddenly, and this is called quenching. The result of it after cooling is a change in the color of the steel due to the formation of oxide layers, or more accurate in this case, an oxide layer. But you can create multiple layers, and this is particularly important if you are unhappy with how dark the result is. You can repeat the process of heating and quenching the steel to make it darker. So for example, if it comes out the first time and you think, no, I want a bit more, heat it up, and then do it again. Importantly, you can make the finish darker, but you cannot make it lighter. To get a lighter result, you basically need to start again by sanding away the finish and then reheating and doing so. So just be aware of that. If you're not sure, start light and build up. While we've shown you how to use an oil quench using a container, there are other approaches to this, such as sprays, commercial bluing agents, and more. These all work well, but generally are at least somewhat more dependent on experience. Whereas with this, even if you're not particularly knowledgeable, and if you're not knowledgeable at all, you can still get a good enough result. It's just a matter of being aware that with experience you'll get better at judging both temperature and end effect. This is how you can add or even in some cases refinish your tools. It is mostly straightforward, and the result will last for a long time, which means you may not need to do this again for many years. In other cases, you may think that it's a good way to maintain your tools overall and something you want to do regularly, if only purely for the aesthetic results. Or it might just be a skill you find interesting to hold on to. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please do post any comments, questions or suggestions you have below.